Canada's inflation rate was up last month. Stats Canada says the country's annual inflation rate rose to 3.3% in July. It comes after inflation tumbled to 2.8% in June, falling within the Bank of Canada's target range of between 1 and 3% for the first time since March 2021. StatsCan cites gas prices falling less dramatically than they did a year ago and grocery prices increasing 8.5% on an annual basis. Well, it's hard to talk about inflation without talking about the price of groceries. For more on this, we are joined by Mike Masso. He is an associate professor and food economist with the University of Guelph. Thank you so much for joining us, Mike. I think, this topic of food prices, it's, no pun intended here. It's hard to swallow given the fact that you go to the grocery store and you're seeing things like butter at $8, $9. You look at two steaks the other day I saw for about just over $40. How should consumers, I guess, how are consumers stomaching these prices, and what should people anticipate moving forward?
Well, I think there's no doubt that food price increases have been dramatic and they are painful for Canadians. We can't, we can defer a new computer, we can defer a new car, we can't defer eating every day. And so the food price inflation is profoundly impactful on Canadian households. I think there is some room for optimism here, though. If you look at the monthly numbers, food prices actually went up less than the rate of inflation, than everything else in that inflation in the month of July. So there is some room to say that things are slowing down. What you have to consider is the annual number is over the last year, and we've had some big increases, and we had big increases as we got out of the summer last year, and those are still in that number. So while the number for July is a little higher than it was for June, it is still lower than the general inflation number if we look at just food. So I think as we continue to get into the Canadian production season and more fresh fruit comes in and fresh vegetables come into season, we'll see a little bit more of a buffer down. And I think there's some reason, while there are some potential dark clouds on the horizon, there's some reason for optimism relative to food prices in the near term.
Other than the grocery rebate that the federal government just distributed, are there any other tools that you think that the government has, not tapped to make things a little bit easier on consumers?
Well, in my view, the best way to help people with these price increases is the rebate that we did. You can argue whether that was enough. Should we do it again? All of those, I think, are valid questions. But given the reason these food prices are going up, I think it's difficult for governments to intervene. You've got the war in Ukraine. We have extreme weather events. You've got the Canadian dollar being low, which was a factor over the past winter. I think all of those are difficult for the government to control. So if they want to give us relief, then sort of direct payments, particularly to those who need it the most, is probably the best tool at their disposal.
Well, what about removing the carbon tax?
Well, you could have an argument. I mean, there's no definitive evidence as to how much the carbon tax is affecting food prices. My guess is that it is affecting it somewhat. As policymakers, they have to decide on the trade-off. We know that extreme weather events are one of the factors in this. Removing the carbon tax isn't going to make a big difference in the short term, but the policy objective from the carbon tax is to reduce our emissions. So you may be robbing Peter to pay Paul in that circumstance, but that is another tool perhaps at their disposal.
Obviously a very difficult time for many people out there with the rising cost of food, but this is kind of a reality over the last little while. Mike Von Masso, Associate Professor and Food Economist with the University of Guelph, we appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day.